Peace, wonderful people. Thank you for joining me this week on Learning with Lear. Super excited to bring you this episode. It is a conversation, a real organic, just uh, genuine conversation I got to have with the phenomenal Rosa Clemente. Known Rosa about 15 years, and she's always somebody that inspires me. That when you think about a moral compass and moving with integrity, Rosa is got to be at the top of that list. Wanted to add some context to the conversation because we had this conversation before Vice President Harris had selected Tim Walz as her running mate. And so some of the conversation Rosa will talk about like who Kamala Harris will select. We didn't know that he was going to select Tim Walz. I'm saying that because obviously that choice had led to some conversations around Kamala Harris's commitment to progressive values and progressive politics that we don't get into because she hadn't picked him yet. Also, we spent a lot of time talking about electoral politics. We spent a lot of time talking about Palestine and Gaza. Things that are top of mind for lots of folks right now. I hope you enjoy. Those aren't the only topics we discuss. We talk about everything. Hope you enjoy. Please like the video. Please subscribe. Would love to get to 100 subscribers. Feel free to send emails, comment, let us know what your thoughts are. Let me know who you would like to have me talk to and what you would like to hear more of, all right? Again, thank y'all for being here. Love each and every one of y'all, and I hope you enjoy this conversation.
My name is Brian Vernon, Executive Director, Founder, all that good stuff of Lear Cultural Coaching. Super excited for this week's episode. As you can see, we got the one, the only, the phenomenal Rosa Clemente here with us. What's up, Rosa? How are you?
What's good, fam? I appreciate you so much. I think it's been at least 15 years that we have known each other, and it's a blessing right now in these times, and I just appreciate you asking me to be on.
Man, I appreciate you. I was thinking about that. So before we started recording, we were talking about kind of where I want to start this is we were at a conference at the University of Minnesota, Vices to Versus. Shout out to all the organizers.
That's when I met B Fresh and Maria Isa. Yeah, okay.
All of them, yeah. Shout out to B and Maria
now
too.
I got it. I'm like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. And so I was like, looking up, I was like, yo, Rosa's the shit. Hip hop journalist. I had read the piece. Russell Simmons ain't hip hop. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be as fierce as Rosa. And you were sitting there.
Also, I wrote that piece in 2001, and I was completely right about who he is, because that's why he's in Bali, because there's no extradition treaty and all the women that come forward. I'm like, I kind of knew this a long time ago, but also because of the Me Too movement, the women that have been assaulted have all come forward.
Yeah.
And I just think it speaks to patriarchy in general and what does that look like. But
yeah, absolutely. Well, I remember reading yourself, Dream Hampton, so many other women hip hop heads were out saying these things, and people in my circle, dudes in my circle, and I would say even myself were hesitant to be like, man, it can't really be that bad. And then now you fast forward ahead, and it's like, damn, everything that they said was true. And not only was it true, it's so much worse. You look at what's happening with Diddy, and just and I'm from Minneapolis, and they had the hip hop scene there had a fallout around patriarchy and sexual violence, and so yeah, we were there. I had read that piece. I looked up to you, and we were chopping it up, and you said, "Hey, white people need a support group," and it was the first time I heard anybody say in my life, in real life, white people need to go get together and do some healing, and then we can maybe see some progress towards racial justice.
Yeah.
And that has been so informative in the way that I've tried to conceptualize anti-racism, or what my role is and all that. And I'm today, right, in 2024, we're in this moment where you got Donald Trump and Trumpism leveraging all the ugliest parts. Kiese Layman's likes to call it the worst of white people, right? He's capitalizing, his campaign is capitalizing on that, doing what whiteness does. And I'm concerned because I see on the left this inability to, especially for white folks on the left, to understand what the assignment is, right? And in the way the young folks like to say, You know, you're not understanding the assignment. It's not to go distance ourselves from our cousins who might be confused about what's going on. We got to give them a chance. We got to call them in and give them a chance not to be the ops, at least on some level, right?
Yeah.
But we ain't doing any favors. We ain't making ourselves useful if we're consistently trying to separate ourselves from other folks and not doing our own healing or not helping our people heal. And that's only going to leave this space where the racism and misogyny that Kamala Harris is about to experience becomes, and it becomes a thing, right? And now we don't even have the language to say, hey, actually, we can critique Kamala Harris, anybody running as empire, as the candidate of empire, of imperialism, of white supremacy, capitalist patriarchy, without saying it's their identity, right? Like without being like, because she's a woman, because they're a black person.
Yeah.
And I just think our anti-racism isn't getting to a place where we can do that. And I would love to just start the conversation with that. Like, how are you feeling in this time? Also, shout out to you. Super proud. Like, I got to vote for you in 2008. You and Cynthia McKinney. Yeah. And so, you know, you have a really unique perspective to offer to this, because lots of people were like uncommitted. I'm not voting for Joe Biden. Finally, we're able to talk about Gaza in some sort of real way. So I would just love to just be quiet and listen to you talk a little bit.
If I was a political analyst in the room with the Kamala Harris's people, the statement she made with the Prime Minister of Israel was it was probably the best I've ever seen in this way. Not that I agree. It was so focused, right? So you see her and she's like, we will help you, but also stop bombing, you know, and killing civilians. But also, she's also the vice president. So it's not about stopping the day of killing. It's for you to say, this is a genocide. Like, it also took a lot of time from the Clinton administration back in the day to say what was going on in Syria, to be like, this is genocide, right? Or even with Rwanda. So it's just like, it angers me more, even though I'm not a Democrat, you know, but I've been telling people, it's like, she's really good at it. She's like, let me say something, but not say all this stuff.
Right.
But even with her saying that, today when I was looking at all the news, she's being already castigated for basically saying, like, I am concerned about the civilian toll. Right.
Right.
I also believe with that, around these elections, I know the enthusiasm once Biden was like, I'm out, and she is there, because like I said, privately, but now here, my daughter was like, Mom, is the first Black woman. She might be the president. I want to vote for her, but am I selling out? I was like, no, boo boo, what are you talking? You're not selling out. But also, there's also a privilege of us in New York State that we already know she's going to get the state of New York, right?
Right.
And that's something that I haven't been struggling with. I just been like super mindful. And the last thing is also, I'm super mindful of 44,000 African American women getting on a car, right? Like, and then 20,000 Black men getting on a car. And then, you know, the message after that also, the message after that was, well, we have $109 million. But that's not coming from the 44,000 sisters, or the 24 with the, like, collectively, because I've been looking at all the finance stuff, collectively, she raised $5 million. Where is she raising the other $114, right? Corporations, Hollywood, PACs, and all of that.
Well, they said, I mean, I know a lot of people were coming at AOC and some of the other members of the squad who were pretty open about wanting Biden to stay in, saying that it was the donor class that was trying to push him out.
Well, I think that's ridiculous, because for him to say, you know, it's the elite, you are the elite. Like,
well, that part, right.
Like, you know, younger people may not even been alive, but this is the same man, you know, that ran the hearings to get Clarence Thomas into the Supreme Court while deriding Anita Hill, right? Like, So for me, it was just like, yo, people, what is happening right now? Like this don't make any sense, but at the end of the day, like both of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party all about seizing power, and they're going to do it any way they can. So, but I think it's important right now because there's so many people like gun ho on her, and I'm not gonna vote for her. I've been public. I'm voting for Cornel West and Melina Abdullah. I'm not even voting for the Green Party, where I was the nominee with Cynthia in 2008. So I think right now with all the avalanche of social media, then what's good, what's happening. But I think we need to understand who she is in terms of capitalism, right? So she could pull in mad money with the Divine Nine fraternity sororities. She could pull in money from APAC kind of thing. And she has accepted money from APAC, and she's accepting it right now. So to me, I think what I have found super distressing is like 2 days ago, you would like stop the genocide in Gaza, and now you're all for Harris.
To your point, or of that, of like, she's gonna get this corporate money. She's gonna get those $105 million or whatever Absolutely. It was from that. But there's also this yes and, right? And especially as a white man, I'm like, I'm never gonna try to flatten what it would mean for Black women in this country to see a Black woman president.
Absolutely.
And there's the yes and, right, of like, yeah. And she's gonna take APAC money. She's gonna do these things. And like, so there's the duality in that I fear, like, or what I want to tell particularly white folks watching this is, we don't get to you don't get to run that through a purity test. You know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta have, well, before we jumped on here, you were saying like, I ain't got no judgment for anybody. Vote how you want to vote, but make sure you know how you're voting and why you're voting that way.
Yes.
And then also there's a thing when I was coming up, I'm from Minneapolis. I currently live in Atlanta, but there's a elder in Minneapolis who his name's Ricardo Levins Morales. And
not Ricardo.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he talks a lot about the elections are moon spaces. They don't actually generate any light. They reflect what's happening in the community and in the world and in the country. And so we need to be focused on sun spaces, on creating light, on creating movement. And so I think about the ways that what makes me excited is not necessarily a Harris campaign, but rather the opening that that a lot of the committed and just committed people who have principles and were like, nah, we're gonna vote. We will not support a candidate who says that they're giving unconditional support to the state of Israel, for example.
Well, right? I mean, I think that's why she was brilliant, but her being brilliant doesn't take the fact that probably tonight we're going to see more children bombed. Like, she didn't get up there and say, like, what about all the children? But also, what about all of those that survived their injuries, their paraplegic, wheelchairs?
That are starving right now. That
are starving, yeah. I mean, I think this is what happens, right? Like, look, what all this electoral politics is being like the lesser two evils. And what I say around that is two things. So if anybody watching this is from New York City, you take the 6 local or the 6 express, right?
Right.
We, the people, are the express. They, the politicians, are the local, right? But a lot of this is emotion, and I get it. Like, when I ran for office and the day the election happened, some of my comrades threw a party and we were there. And then the men like Barack and Michelle came out with the daughters. I was like, stop everything. This is a historical moment. And as a trained historian, that's how I always see things. I don't ever want someone to not take a moment and be like, okay. And also, even though I identify as a Black Puerto Rican, the African-American woman experience is different. And I want to support those African-American women, right? So it's tricky, you know.
And she's about to get all these DEI hires and
what
is she? Is she? You don't even know what she is. Is like,
and it was like DEI wasn't even a thing when she ran. That shit's only happened in the last 3 years.
Right.
Like, but also that's the system. It happened to the Harvard president. Like the three women that quit during those committees around students and encampments and what was going on around Gaza, right? Like they don't have power, but they're setting how we should be looking at this.
Right. Well, and the parameters for what, right? Like what needs to happen. So for example, like in order for anybody to run as a major party candidate, there are certain things that you have to be in line with, right? There's only a certain amount that you're going to be able to say about things that I think matter to the vast majority of Americans, regardless of their political spectrum, right? Like, think if you go ask people, is rent too high? Is food too damn expensive?
Yeah.
That they're gonna say, hell yeah, right? And if you ask them, is 100,000 civilians being killed bad, and the vast majority of them women and children worse? They're gonna say yeah. But then, if to run as a major party candidate, to even suggest that we should be thinking about civilians in an Israel-Palestine conflict is to push the boundaries a little too much. Like you said, she didn't even say nothing wild. She wasn't like, "Hey, we're gonna stop the flow of guns."
Like, right now,
she didn't say ceasefire now. She said
that's what a politician at that level does, which makes her super savvy. But also, I am so looking forward to her debating Trump so she can destroy him, and which is also like now the Trump camp is like, oh, let's do it later, because right now they're scrambling.
He don't want no smoke.
Like, what's going on?
He does not want the smoke.
No, I'm saying, as a prosecutor, one of the things that she did, unfortunately, is when she criminalized parents if their children were, quote, truant, right?
Right.
And then she does take money from AIPAC and Boeing and all these corporations. With that said, I'm so looking forward to that day where she's going to destroy this dude, period.
She's going to dog walk him. And it is going to be the greatest thing that will happen
like 25 years. The greatest thing from Barack Obama was like, I accept the nomination.
Yeah. Right? And even when he was like, they tried to, when he was like, I'm not running, and the Republicans started clapping, and he was like, yeah, I already won both of these goofballs. Like, I already won this. Like, there are moments, right? Like, once you realize it's interesting because, and this will be a good segue into what I want to talk about or get into a little bit, where it's like, you can have this critique of the system, and I think we should, right? Especially those on the left, because that's the only way that we keep any sort of check and balance on the far right. Because these white nationalists and white Christian nationalists, men particularly, have no problem. Project 2025 is not this fantasy land, right? Like, that's a real ass blueprint that is scary. How close to coming to fruition is. So the people on the left, I think we do need to be able to say, hey, taking money from AIPAC ain't the business. Selling weapons of war ain't the business. Imperialism is not the business. And I think we can also have the both end and say, I can't wait to see this black woman, dog walk a rapist, a racist. Like, I hope, and I don't know, it would be something. I have this vision,
and also I have respect with the millennials, right? Like, my daughter's part of that, and like, I have respect when she's like, Mom, let's talk about this. I have respect when it's, again, a specific African American, South Asian, Jamaican, Indian woman, because when I was running in 2008, there were many radio shows that would call me and be like, destroy Clinton. I was like, yes, but on her policies, not because you think she's wearing pantsuits, not because you think, and I was very clear, because there was a moment where I actually did an interview where she was on, and I had a moment to say, obviously, you don't know who I am, but I will tell you this, that your husband freed the Puerto Rican political prisoners, except 2 who stayed behind because the rest of them weren't free. But I also was in that dynamic here in Albany, New York, so like, I was in those rooms and I was just like, okay, But also I like at the end of the day, I'm like, you're not gonna like say this bullshit patriarchy. She's not pretty. She wears pantsuits. Her hair's too short. Like, I'm not gonna do that shit like that. And that's how I feel also with Kamala Harris. Like, I feel like I am that person that would be like, no, stop this shit. Like, y'all need to stop it, basically.
That's
And
where I
let's
want
talk
to go
about
with this.
policy and not like how we view them individually.
Yeah. And I want particularly, my thing. I talk to white folks about that.
Yeah.
Like, I want to be very clear. There's goofballs like JD Vance, who's this pseudo, working class person who's not at all. Let me be very clear, he's not. But he's out here running around talking about cat ladies and they're childless and all that. Like, people on the left who have valid critiques of Harris's policies and stances have to be vigilant. And I would argue, not like cut that shit off, defend her against those attacks, because those are very different things than her policies, right? Don't vote for Harris on principled reasons. Cool, whatever. Like, we could talk about strategy and in places, but
Well, I think what's happening now is everybody around Trump was like, we might have picked the wrong VP, right?
yeah, I mean, they're starting
They
to
were
say
like,
like, oh, this dude's a goofball.
That kind of thing. I mean, listen, when Jennifer Aniston, like Hollywood heavyweight, has never ever, like, if you look at her record, not in a bad way, she's never dipped a toe.
No,
But
never.
then she reads that and she's like, you know what? You want to call me a cat lady, whatever that looks like. But also,
Right.
like, how many people, like, I got people in my family that didn't want kids. And when did this become a referendum of how you're a family person and you don't have children, so you're the enemy? Like, my family's so big that I have my closest cousins who chose.
Right.
My abuela chose to have 16 children. 16. They all
Holy.
lived. Yeah. And now the highest group, the of my like, I'm part of the older group of my cousins, and 5 of them don't ever want to have children. And I'm like, that's not a weapon.
Nah.
I'm saying,
Nah.
like, when the fuck did choosing not to have? But the thing is, I think what they're very smart in is media messaging. So the way he cleaned it up was like, I'm just saying, don't we want strong families? As opposed to how many, even myself, people are like, you have blood family and you have chosen family.
Absolutely. And also, the only way that you're even having this conversation about strong families or this and that is because she's a woman.
Right.
Because we ain't asking Trump about his family values.
Yeah, and we're not the fact that he had three of his children from 3 baby mamas, right? And also, like, all the men who are like, it's just super strange, but it's also like, men are allowed to do all of this and not be with their family. So now you're throwing all this on the women.
This dude said, they wouldn't have empathy who was the dude that just tweeted out? Damn, I forget his name. It's another white journalist dude who was like, another a not talked about reason Harris isn't qualified is because she's childless, and he said because she doesn't have empathy for families. And it's like, if empathy is a quality and a characteristic, cool, I'm actually okay with that. But that disqualifies 99% of politicians. Yeah. Like, listen, I would love to live in a world where empathy actually mattered, but it doesn't for 99% of the politicians that are running.
And yeah, why are you choosing to, like, not highlight her daughters that are part of her life through her partner? Because when I started seeing that, my personal experience around that is this. My sister and her husband been together almost 30 years. When they got together, he had 2 babies, right? Yeah. And my sister was struggling around having babies in her body. But when we first were like, oh, okay, this is like, my family were like, oh, this is, my sister Janita, hey, it's all good. We're not going to be like, oh my God, don't date him because he has 2 young people, right? And now I look 25 years later, and those are her children. They don't mean they have to come out of her body.
Nah,
And I
period.
think it's been super disrespectful, to be like, well, you don't have children in your life. How many people do we know that are like our cousins or sisters? Maybe we didn't have children. I mean, I did, my sister did. But what about our people who didn't? It's a completely legitimate choice. And that's what they do. And that's what
Absolutely.
Vance is doing. But I also think his message is really failing. I
I hope
think
so. I
I
hope
think it
so.
is.
And
Yeah,
like I'm glad you brought that point up because look, I'm divorced, remarried. I got bonus kids. I have a blended family,
yeah,
and from everything that we hear about them, they're doing this co-parenting and blended family thing fairly well.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
hard as fuck. I mean, like that shit is hard to co-parent and communicate around children and
yeah.
like that level of stuff. So like, if anything, that's a qualification. That's a reason for me to vote. Oh shit, she's a stepmom and she's working out.
I know when I saw it,
That's
I
a
was like,
diplomat right
well, like
there.
I was like, Mama La, I love that. Like, right? Like I love that.
Right.
And I think that's what you're talking about. Like two things can happen at the same time.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. What do you think is gonna? Well, actually, let me like let's wrap up the electoral politics section because then I want to get to a larger, just general state. But how
Yeah.
do you think this plays out?
I'm saying right now it's going to be close. I think
Yeah,
right now, obviously, again, through my daughter, she has tapped into the young people that were like, F both of y'all.
yeah,
I also, as someone who ran of the third party, I have seen young people question both the parties and ask, why aren't there other parties, more
yeah,
than two, that doesn't, vote for democracy? I literally watch news every day. I look at the polls. And I know the polls are skewed because it's not like they're talking to all of us. I don't think that's what's gonna. It's super close. Like I'm
yeah.
thinking it's super. Like I'm like, yo, Pennsylvania is about to be super close. I mean, it also is going to depend on who she picks for vice president, right? So she could go like Shapiro in Pennsylvania, and I forget the other dude, Mark Kelly from Arizona, right?
Yeah.
I think she's going to go with Shapiro, the governor, because if they don't secure, Pennsylvania,
They
Ohio,
can't they
Wisconsin,
can't
Michigan,
win
they
without
don't win.
Pennsylvania. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I think is going to happen. But look, we're seeing it. She's a 1 point margin of error.
right.
And like I said earlier, that statement that she made with the prime minister of Israel was really amazing politics, if you want to say that. And I'm not saying this not caring about what's going on with her people. I'm just saying, like, I've been in this game long enough to be like, she did her job.
She's a great politician. Don't get it twisted.
I mean,
Like
yeah,
she's a good politician. Like you said, she is running on this tough on crime. We're finna lock up parents for truant kids.
yeah,
That was the first
I
time
know,
she was
but
on my
people don't
radar.
remember that. That's
As
the
an
whole thing.
educator, I'm like, wait, hold up.
Yeah,
Like, that's what we're doing. But then flipped the Green New Deal. She was
yeah.
on, livable wage, all that. And then you're on the she dog walked Biden at the debate, was on the thing, but now all of a sudden you're his vice president.
Well, I
And
mean, that's the electoral politics, but I also feel like the work she's doing is a little different, and
yeah,
it's like I see her someone that's not evil per se.
right.
I see her as hopefully listening to the people around her. Because once Biden made the address, where is she going and what is she saying?
Yo,
You know, so I mean, at the end of the day, I also vote third party. So I'm like, I just think it's gonna be close. I think we're gonna be watching at 11 p.m. like what's happening, what's going on. Like
and
we're
I
gonna
will
be
say,
there for like a whole 24 hours. Like, what does this look like? And
uh,
I don't underestimate patriarchy. I'm also like, I have said this, I don't think she wins on this patriarchy. I don't believe there are a lot of men in this country and even women who are matriarchal, you know, to win.
yeah,
And that's kind of the narrative, right? And also Trump also has a narrative of speak, specifically African American men and Latino men that have been, hit with inflation in their families. So I think it's going to be super, super close. I think we have to be prepared to, what happens if she wins and what these efforts are going to do that night.
So to segue, I'm like listening to Trump was it yesterday? It might have been yesterday actually, where who know, I don't think it was a slip. He said it like 4 times where he's like, hey, you ain't gonna have to vote again. Vote me in now and you ain't gonna have to vote again.
Right,
like,
because I'll be the dictator for life.
that shit's scary. You know what I mean? And I've
scary.
been one, like we talked about, I don't want to be driven by fear. I don't, right? I don't think I'll be the first one to tell you though, that shit is scary. And vote Cornel West, vote Jill Stein, whatever. Do what you got to do to make sure Trump ain't a president. It's like, I think that's a legitimate, like,
no, it's legitimate.
I'm not one that a vote for them is a vote for Trump. I don't think that.
Yeah, but it's legitimate. And I mean, I hear what you're saying, but also like what they're going to try to frame it with the third parties, which look, I interviewed Dr. West 2 days ago. Yesterday came out a report where the Democratic Party is trying to block him for being on 5 ballots.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So at this moment around third party politics, it's the Democratic Party that's trying to stop us. Then the Republicans come in, like they see the gap and they're like, hey, what's good? We got you.
Mm-hmm.
But I again, like it's super distressing again to have like people in your life like one day will like fuck Joe Biden, but hello Kamala.
Yeah.
And what does that look like and what does that mean? So for me, I mean, I can navigate these things, but I don't think most people can. And I think the rhetoric, being out there around third parties, I don't think people look, at the end of the day, this is what I think. Unless you're an educated voter, you're just going to go for it. And that we live in a country that actually doesn't even do civics again. They don't understand the electoral college. They don't understand the map. They don't understand what that looks like in your community. And, I mean, early voting starts in September. I mean, so I have 2 ways of looking at this. If this dude loses, we have the January 6th coup will be like the short story, and it's going to be a longer story for them.
I was going to say that there's also that part, right? Of like, he's already been very clear. He don't really care about a democratic process or an outcome, right? Like, so what are we willing to do no matter what happens in November? It is a question I think a lot of people ain't willing to talk about.
Yeah.
And I want to think, so like, to make sure he doesn't win, and this is where we can spend the last little part of our time, because I know you got some things, but there's this idea, or I think what we have seen play out is what Carol Anderson documents brilliantly, I thought, in White Rage.
Brilliant. Like, every book.
Yeah, please read that. If you haven't read White Rage yet, please do. We're clearly seeing that. The rise of Trump was that, but now certainly the pushback, it started as, CRT, and now it's, and wokeism, and now it's DEI. And the thing that is concerning me around that is the way that we have framed anti-racism, where white people, I think, feel like, oh, whiteness is like, we talk about privilege all the time. And if you're watching this, you know that I have critique that framework, right? Where like I firmly believe whiteness is harmful to people who look like me, to white folks.
Absolutely.
Right? Like that's the initial wound of whiteness, is like, damn, we have to accept that somehow we're justifying this violence that we're seeing, the genocidal violence of the native people of this land, of the Caribbean, right? Like and then also the enslavement of African people. And we've been receiving this poison that has told us that somehow that's justifiable, or that we're that, and that we're better than them, that we should treat people in this way. But our anti-racism doesn't seem, in my opinion, doesn't make room for white people to be like, hey, I really got to heal from this, right? Because we keep naming it as this privilege. And I'm not saying it's not beneficial to be white in white supremacy. Of course it is, right? Like, that's the whole point of it, is to keep you like, oh, but we got these benefits. Don't look at what it's costing you. And I think that is, I worry that white people are going to play the cut too much in in this process right now, in this moment, and I'm not even talking about just electorally, right? And in the world of politics, I'm saying just in general, they're like, oh shit, I tried after the summer of racial reckoning and I just didn't get it right, or I don't know enough. So let me just fall back. It ain't my fight. We don't got there's no reason for me to get involved. That ain't got shit to do with me. And we got Sonia Massey's getting murdered by the police still. I remember one of our first conversations was the Malcolm X grassroots movement study. Operate what the 28 hours.
Every 28 hours. Yeah,
every 28 hours.
And it's interesting because that's been like 10 years. And now I'm sending people stuff like, this just didn't happen with y'all. We meaning Cooperation Jackson and my comrade Kelly Okuno and Ajamo Baraka, who ran for vice president with Jill Stein. We created that. And I was at UMass Amherst when it came out. And it's not that I've never seen police violence. I'm from New York. I've been involved in all the cases around police violence, but that's what I think sometimes may be, how are we sending these messages to young people so they understand, like, this is not the first time. Like, Kamala running is amazing, but also remember that Shirley Chisholm ran.
Right.
Like, it's amazing. And when we just remember that Cynthia McKinney and me ran, and when I look back on the work because I saved everything, I'm like, oh, I was totally ahead of the game, and now, but I think what's happening now is that information comes in so fast, right? Like the next, within 30 seconds, somebody's saying something, that there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of miseducation. But I also think I'm curious to see, honestly, in this election, can they hold the youth vote? Because if they hold it, they're going to be okay. It doesn't go their way. What are these young people? And I think that's a big mistake that movements have made in general. Like, you went through, an organization and you built it and you're doing community organizing, and then you're saying everybody vote for someone. Like, I think too many tentacles of our movement are so jacked up that they're so focused on a presidential election, right? But they're not focused on what's going on in the streets. I mean, like, I live in Albany, New York. If I go 2 miles to Arbor Hill and I'm like, how many people are you registered to vote? Nobody's going to be registered to vote. Right. And if they are, particularly the men, they're not going to vote for a woman, because that's what they've been telling me. I get it, but you sisters, whatever. I mean, I actually had a dude in like my larger community be like, but yeah, when you guys have your period, what does that mean for the president? Right?
That's why
people don't want to hear that, but that's
real shit. That's happening. No. Those are real conversations that we gotta have.
Conversations in my community and conversations with some of my cousins that are men. They're like, oh my God. They're like, girl, they're like, Josie, how are you going to have a woman? What happens when she's on her menstrual cycle? And I was like, but that's literally my blood family telling me this. So I come from these like experiences where I have so many of my family that are also the working poor. And and what would that look like? And anti-Blackness, like, what does that look like? But not just anti-Blackness, but patriarchal and misogynistic, even though they think they're not, but they are.
And I think that's the key. You said it right there, where it's like, this is a moment where we have to interrupt a lot of the traditional ways of being and understanding the world. And I think that's even true for anti-racism, right? Like, for white people, it's like, hey, I want to make it okay for us to talk about the harm that racism does to us, right? Not to try to equate it, right? Like, because it's not the same, right? It's not life or death to us in the most immediate ways that it is often with communities of color, particularly Black people. But it is life or death in the sense of, y'all, we're dying from air. My community in Minneapolis, Northeast, we get the air pollution from the trash incinerator burning on the north side. It comes right across the river. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, we're dying from this too. We ain't got no public infrastructure. We ain't got this shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, Jonathan Metzel's book, Dying of Whiteness, that shit is real. Like, we are suffering from white supremacy. And I think now is the time to start giving young people that language and the way to think about it, to say, actually, we're actually going to build a legit coalition that talks about real shit. You know what I mean? And then also have the ability to call out the state's response to that, because as we see with the murder of Fred Hampton and so many other people, the state ain't gonna stand for anything real like that happening. You know what I mean?
You know, like this is the whole part right now. All those even with the squad, right? At the end of the day, Rashida Tlaib's been stronger, right? Like she was like, I'm not gonna sit this out. I'm gonna sit in while this maniac criminal thing and hold up war criminal, right?
Yeah.
I also fear her pain because I believe that here's the squad. But what also I understand at the end of the day, here's these 5 women. You can't go against 435 people in the Congress. For me, I've been very disappointed at AOC, Ayanna Presley, Ilhan Omar. Like, I usually don't even give people some money, but I sent someone to Rashida because I feel she's like the last person standing. Like, stop it. Like, this is what's happening. How are you letting this prime minister accused of war crimes by the International Criminal Court, and then you see him 40 times while he's talking about annihilation and genocide?
That's crazy.
And
It's
you know,
crazy.
as the first Palestinian woman, I was like, I don't even know how you can handle this.
Right.
You know, and I just think at the end of the day, right now, we're just in a place where there's no radical imagination. What does that look like? What does it look like that we don't get sucked into it? Like, everybody vote who you are, whatever you want. But where is the building? Where's the self-determination? What groups do we support? What teachers are like putting in curriculums and this? And it's super hard right now because now you're dealing with a Republican right that's trying to take all that away.
Well, they
And they got the
understand that.
money for it.
So I'm in Atlanta, and in Georgia they just got rid of AP, African American state.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like the right understands the cultural building blocks way better than the like establishment left liberals do, right? Like I'm not a
Absolutely.
liberal, right? Like
Yeah.
I think the left progressives understand it a little bit more, but I think the piece, and we've talked about this, and I think you're alluding to it, and let's just name it. The largest voting bloc in this country remains non-voters. It remains
Absolutely.
people who are like, fuck this shit. It
Yeah.
ain't got nothing to do with me.
They
It's
don't
all
like any of
Peter.
y'all.
It doesn't matter. And none of y'all represent me or my people. Like, this could never be a conversation that I could hear at my table, or that impacts what my life. And I think that is the problem. And that's where I place the responsibility squarely on Democrats.
Yeah.
In order to engage those people, you actually have to be progressive. You actually have to say, hey, you're sick. You shouldn't have to pay for healthcare. Hey, your
But
school
also,
sucks.
like,
Let's go.
what we have seen with Biden is like, y'all are crazy. You see the kind of you seen the kind of get where he's at. I mean, I was at a point where I was like, this is fucked up.
Yeah.
Here is this older man, beginning those of dementia, that many of our people who like have parents or grandparents. Here's a man that was so surrounded by like his wife, his sister, his son, and one other person. They weren't showing him what was going on, and the president in general, like, if you're the president of the United States, you're gonna get old in that. So once he said that address, which I also would like empathy in me, I was like, all right, but also remember that the DNC told us it was one term. But also, like, I think like what went down with him doesn't specifically give votes to Vice President Harris. Like, I don't think that that's what's going to happen. But also, like, one of the things that I'm very mindful of is also like, listen, the best of our leaders never ran for office and didn't win. I mean, Fannie Lou Ida, Malcolm, Albizu, like, they weren't like, and even Shirley Chisholm, after her run at the end, she said in her memoir, like, this is not a democracy. And I was in the early 60s, right?
Right.
So I really feel like maybe our generation is kind of like, which way do we go? I know how I'm going to vote. My daughter's going to vote another way, but it's so confusing and it's just mass chaos. And I think younger people are like, yo, we can't continue like this. But also social media has a lot to do with the, disinformation. So I think people are really struggling. I think like folks like us are really like, what does that look like? What happens if she gets in? But again, I will always say this, I don't know if she wins just on patriarchy alone, and I could totally be wrong.
I don't think you'd ever lose money betting on the power of white men, male patriarchy.
Absolutely.
Like white masculinity and racism is, I think, the most unchecked power in the country. And that's crazy, you know what I mean? And I want to say I think most of the people who watch this are actually fucking right-wing people who end up emailing me all kinds of stuff. I invite them on here. Come talk. We can talk about anything. And a testimony to that, one of the other things I want to say is, these goofballs in the media are putting cats like Destiny, this podcaster motherfucker, up. This dude was actually talking to Professor Finkelstein and on with like, all these things, who literally saying out his mouth, like, oh, I just read this on Wikipedia, and going through like, we have to do better. Like on the left, we have to do better. This is not, we have actual white people. If you need to put a white man up there, don't put that goofball up there. Please, like, there's actual white people. There's actual people who study this, who are dead ass serious, who have lived experiences that can tell you why people aren't voting and get people to vote. Tell you what policies and have real conversations.
What I'm calling this a punditry class. The persons that are always on CNN or MSNBC. So first and foremost, I mean, like first in general, y'all are multimillionaires.
Right.
Period. Right. It's not like any of these correspondents don't have millions and millions. So when they're like, well, the economy is good, and you're like, so I just spent $8 on an avocado.
That's what I'm like, where's the economy good?
I went to get a watermelon at Walmart and it's $7, right? So like, here are this punditry class, and I see them as complicit, right? Like, I don't want I don't even watch CNN right now because every time Van Josen's on, he's crying about the white man he loves, Biden, and you're like, what the fuck is happening?
I've been watching Mark Lamont Hill disagree with Van, like, and I'm like,
I know, I hit him up.
Mark Lamont Hill's
like
night school YouTube channel gives me life.
I love Joe Biden. He's done, oh my God. And I'm like, I hate you all because all of you are making and have contracts of millions of dollars. So when you say you don't understand, you don't understand. You don't understand housing, food, gas, student loan. No, you don't. But they have now become the factors of people that watch them religiously on the height, right? Like MSNBC pretends is radical, is super left, and they're all snarky. And I don't like that. I don't like when people are like, oh my God, this is so bad. But hey, this happened. Ha. No, F that. And then I don't need to see Van Jones crying on CNN anymore because you're fucking ridiculous. Like, you were socialist 25 years ago. Like, how do you go to that? Right. So
I did not know that. I didn't know he was a socialist.
Oh no, dude was a socialist back in the day in Oakland. Everybody got received on that. But that also means about how we get our information. Now, at the end of the day, I watch them simultaneously. I'll like take my notes, and then I'm watching like the podcast, other people, shows that are, but I think they're a master at that. And I just, every time I watch and they're like, no, the economy is good. I'm like, yeah, you're rich. You just got your $10 million. So your economy is good. Mine is not.
And I think this is the dangerous part, right? Is if you go from that, which you'll see, you'll see talking heads for Democrats, liberals, who are talking about how good the economy is and the bounce back and all that. And you could get on Instagram or get on Facebook and find any number of memes or photos that show somebody's like Instacart or Walmart receipt from 3 years ago, the same exact things, and it's 4 or 5 times more expensive right now than it was then.
Yeah.
how dare you look at something like that and then tell people that the economy's good?
It's
like,
ridiculous.
It's absurd. And like the fact that you don't have enough courage to say, hey, actually, the measure of a healthy economy is not the stock market. It's not this. It's actually, can people feed their families? Can people pay rent? There's not a single state in the country where a minimum wage job can pay rent.
Absolutely. Nowhere.
How is that an acceptable thing? But then it also goes, these are the same people that will tell us we live in a democracy and the largest voting bloc is non-voters.
And that's the thing, like doing all these interviews, I was like, in the last week, I had 8 requests and I was like, what's happening? And then it was all around the Green Party, third party politics, right? Like, we've had these things within our agenda to alleviate certain things, but problematic is that every time a third party candidate, whether it's the Green Party, the Libertarian, Justice for All, Party for Socialism and Liberation, that has 2 women of color running on that, right? Like, we're out here experiencing, because we're working class people. Right. And we are also organizers, and I think all the apparatus of the DNC for them just to keep saying like it's all good is also like, I just look that you make $5 million, so you're good.
Right. They play into that shit too of like, okay, well, we ain't gonna have real conversations about the role of race here or the role of sexism and patriarchy and all that, because they're eating off of that. They're eating off how it goes, and they throw little bones. And then to your point of like, Republicans come in and they see Democrats ain't about real shit. So Trump gets away with saying ridiculous shit like he's the, you know what I mean? Like, has been also good for Black communities and stuff.
Yeah, but also the Supreme Court told him he could do anything he wants.
Well, and then there's,
and that's the right. Like literally, when he said I could kill someone in Times Square and not get arrested, that's actually true right now.
Right now, it literally is.
Like it literally is true. Real.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and then coming out in New York City in the 80s, with the Central Park 5, that was my everyday lesson, because my dad would bring home 3 papers and it was about a lot was over the Central Park 5, right? He put up billboards all around New York City. He lobbied to get the death penalty back in New York to, execute
for them.
He did that. So I'm in the 80s and I'm going to the club or whatever, my homies and from the suburbs of New York City, and you see that and you see that. But because my dad brought papers, I would always read it. And like one day my dad was like, I don't think they did that. And I was like, I don't think they did that, Daddy. Like, I'm a junior. Right. And I'm like, I don't. And he's like, I think this was a setup. And I was like, oh my God. And here we are 30 years later, understanding what they did. But even when they won everything, they all did not come out fine. Every one of those young men had different families and what that looked like. But when they've been exonerated, it doesn't take away from the pain and the violence that they felt for like 6 people to get in a group and be like, we don't know who did it. Let's just put it on these 5 kids.
So full circle in the conversation is like, I have this vision where I'm like, I pray to the Creator. And I'm gonna invite all y'all watching to pray to the Creator that this happens, where Kamala Harris, a prosecutor, uses that against Donald Trump. Like, your ass wanted the death penalty for these 5 Black and brown men who were children, who were fucking children at the time. Right. Yes. And you still, to this day, when it is indisputable that they're exonerated, right? It's not just like, there was a technicality. Like, we know they didn't do shit. They didn't have shit to do with it. You ain't spoke on that at all, right? And like, what kind of that moment would be something I hope for, or if for no other reason, then I think it has to. There are going to be so many people who take seriously the role of race and all that in that moment, who are, like establishment Democrats who are like, oh, these are blips on the screen in an otherwise okay system. Yeah. To enter the Central Park 5 into a presidential debate, I think would be one of those moments where I think about Ricardo. Like, that's a sun space, right? That's the result of the work that we've done, and we can capitalize on that moment to make hopefully some sort of systemic change. But when everybody's like, well, Trump's, Amber Rose was like, I realized Trump's not racist. All you need is how he deals with the Central Park Five for proof. You don't have to go into the housing discrimination. You don't have to go into the shithole countries. You don't have to get into the disparities between his policies and how they impact different groups of people. Yeah. Him throwing fucking paper towels and toilet papers down in Puerto Rico. Yeah. Right? Like, you don't have to get into all that. Just look at the Central Park Five. But then also, and this is where I'm like, we have to do it better at anti-racism. I know I'm coming back to this theme. Like, Amber Rose's pops is a white man, right? And she said, I talked to my dad, and my dad told me he's not racist. And this is where I'm like, yo, white men, can we just tell the truth? Like, can we tell the fucking truth? That man is a bigot and a racist, and our systems are racist. And if we will actually get free when we can tell that truth, when we can say, hey, this shit backwards, and we don't have to do this anymore.
Right.
We don't have to do this anymore. Like, we really don't. We're going to be okay. People will still hug us. Matter of fact, we might even be able to say, you know what? I cry sometimes and I need a hug and all these things. Like,
absolutely.
We might actually be full, healthy, happy human beings if we could just tell the truth, man. Tell the truth, particularly white men, which is crazy, right? And we said about it, like,
that would be good. Men against Trump. That would be dope.
Look, I'm working on it. That
would be amazing.
But it's crazy, right? Because you mentioned, like, win with black women, win with black men, and the way that the Harris campaign leveraged the Divine Nine. And I think that's dope, right? Like, do what you do. There's reasons for that. But there's nothing like that for white men right now. I know Serge is trying. Shout out to Serge.
Yeah.
But we really need to take that seriously. We as in white men right now. Like, our healing is on the line.
So I don't know if you heard of Black Men Build. Phil Agnew, who was the founder of Dream Defenders,
I know Phil Agnew, yeah.
Yeah, so they just went on a 10-city tour, and it was pretty incredible to watch. Dope. And knowing Phil and how incredible he is, and when he said, like, I want to do the work within my people, my black men. And when he started doing it, even people were like, oh, you're misogynistic. I'm like, no, come on. Because I come out of school in the 90s where when we were doing events, we would also be like, okay, the brothers go there and the women go there. We didn't have anything on gender in the 90s to be like they or them, right? But that's what it was. And to me, like, those were incredible experiences, right? Like, and then the brothers would come back and we're like, oh God, I didn't realize, but now I realize it. Like, and I think that would be a great thing. There was also in the early 90s about a group of brothers, maybe coming out of Morehouse, that formed a group, said Black solidarity with Black women, and we have to internalize our patriarchy. And that was in the early 90s, right? So, because I also feel like a lot of the men in our movement, or in general since Ferguson, I think they feel attacked all the time. Like, black men are like, you're attacking us. That's not the issue. But listen, I even did an interview this week with one of my homies, and he was like, well, what's number one, gender or race? And I was like, dude, are we right here? Like, I answered that question 30 years ago. And I was like, for you to ask it is ridiculous. Like, two can happen at the same time. Well, let's not act like in our movement spaces we have not dealt or had to deal with patriarchy and misogyny. Like, stop it. So the whole point in saying that is, like, what Phil is doing is the work. And the work meaning that you were born a man in this country. Once you begin to understand things at 6 or 7, you have already been taught that you are a better because of your gender. So then it grows and it grows and it grows, right? And then it goes to the Black middle class and the Latino middle class. And then you have all these arguments. Well, like, so right now, George Floyd died. We can only talk about Black men being killed by the police. But because of the interventions of a new generation from Ferguson, Black Lives Matter, they're like, or even the Me Too movement, like, no, we're not rolling like that anymore.
Right.
So I do think it's super critical to keep educating men in how to root out the internalized patriarchy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rosa, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you.
Holler. Make sure you follow Rosa on IG, Twitter, X. Actually, fuck X, fuck Elon Musk, all that shit.
I'm like, go to Threads on
Facebook,
Instagram.
something like that. All right, y'all. Thank you for joining us this week.